Danny Randall.
Doing well.
Good
Doing
morning.
great.
Got your coffee in hand, your
Oh
what
yeah.
As per
your
usual.
crimpet or whatever. What do we call
Yeah.
Pastry?
They
Oh,
looked good, the
crumpet?
little fried
that? Crumpet,
pancakes.
crumpet. I was like, I knew it
Yeah.
sounded weird. Coffee and crumpets.
Crumpet.
How you guys
Mm.
doing this morning? Bright and early. Bushy
Good,
tail.
man. Good week.
Doing well.
And a good week.
Nice. Yeah, I
Weather's
had a nice
beautiful.
productive week.
Yeah.
Building apps, doing coding stuff, traveling, eating tacos. Man, it's
Lucky
been a
guy.
week.
It is nice getting stuff done, isn't it? Sometimes
It's very nice. Yeah.
does feel good.
Yeah. Well, I hope
There's Chris and
everyone.
Bryce. Hey
Hey, good
guys.
morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Let me reload my Facebook so that I can see you guys and all your awesome comments. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Our live stream today. Do you want to tell us the topic, or should I?
No, you tell the topic and then I'm going to ask a question.
Okay, you're
That
gonna cut
makes
me
sense.
off halfway through. All
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
So today's topic
So
is
anybody who's watching, no, okay. Go for it.
Today's topic is why you need to learn cybersecurity as a developer. Even if you're in web development or you want to be like in data analytics or AI or any of this stuff.
I would say, yeah,
I,
any field in tech, really, like where you're,
yeah.
yeah, you
Or
should know it.
honestly, like if you just use a computer, you should know
You
some
should
of
know
these
some
things.
of it.
Like, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very important. And um, Randall earlier sent over a little list because Randall's our local cybersecurity expert. Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Bryce. Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Danny. I'm
You
just
know,
looking at the
while
comments.
you guys are there, before we get started, and while everybody's just listening, getting set up, let us know down in the comments. What do you think are some of the top things you can do to stay safe online?
Yeah.
No
Mm.
wrong answers here, except for the wrong answers. But I'll be telling, I'll be going. No,
Except for when it's
just
wrong.
let us know down below. What do you think are some of the top things you can do to
It's
stay safe
definitely
online? I'm
definitely
actually going to be,
private tabs all the time. That
yeah,
keeps you safe, right? Private
yeah,
tabs.
deleting your Pornhub history after
Yes.
5 minutes. That's it. Yeah, but I'm I'm from a Google study. I'm actually going to be going over what are the top three things according to experts and the top three things according to non-experts. So let us
Nice.
know down in the
Okay.
comments what you think are some of the top things you can do to stay safe online. And
Yeah,
then
what do you
towards the
guys
end of
think?
the episode, we'll see where your guesses fell.
Bryce said if something makes you go, hmm.
Mhm.
And yeah, and
I mean,
one
I
other
think
thing.
go ahead.
One other thing is for all of you who listen to these episodes, watch these episodes, whatever it may be, your participation actually sets you up to win some pretty cool prizes that we're going to be giving away very, very soon. I think this week or next week, we're going to be kind of discussing some of the giveaways that we have for the top contributors in the group. So every time you post something, every time you respond to somebody else's post, every time you comment in these live streams, Facebook tracks that stuff, and then the top contributors will get rewarded. So you want to make sure you participate if you like cool free stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's some people in the group here who are probably going to be winning that prize if there's not so much competition because I see them posting quite a bit. So yeah, make some posts. Tell us what you're coding, what you're working on. We'd love to hear that stuff. If you have questions, you can always ask them, post them inside the group. We're
Yeah.
always happy to answer questions and help you with your code. So
So can I start off as to why cybersecurity is important for a developer?
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to mention that, like, I think this is actually a really important episode. Before you do that, I want to mention that this is a really important episode because I think the point of this is that you actually give yourself sort of like a self checkup per se on your own security because as a developer, you're going to be doing a lot on a computer and accessing a lot of websites and a lot of sensitive information, and you need to be pretty aware of these things. So as we go through this, I think it's important to sort of have some like self checkup, like consciousness of, am I doing
Yeah.
these things? And how safe am I online? Go ahead.
Not to mention too, yeah, when you're working for other clients and stuff too, you're going to be in control of, auth and stuff. So you could, there is
Yeah.
a certain ethics to it too, of like, doing it appropriately, doing the best work you can for people to make sure it's secure, and like keeping up with best practices, I think is important. I mean, we see so many times how, I mean, every day, some companies getting hacked, losing data, losing information. And sometimes it's like, not a developer's fault, but sometimes it is definitely a developer's fault. And it's like,
Yeah.
so yeah. Anyway,
Mhm.
back to you, Randy.
Yeah. Okay, so security is oftentimes like an overlooked thing, especially when you look at it from like a company standpoint, because there's no real clear uh, profit by investing in security. Security is just kind of
Mhm.
an insurance policy against the bad stuff. Like here's a really bad analogy is that security is kind of like having sex without a condom. You know, it's everything's fun until it's not. Like until you have the unwanted
Mm,
pregnancy or you get an STD, like everything's fine and it's great until it's not. And that's the same thing with security. Is like if you don't work on security, everything's cool until it's not. And so a lot of the pen testers that I know, they're always like, I don't understand why these companies don't hire us before they have a breach, but as soon as they have a breach, they hire us. It's like, yeah, people do what they're incentivized to do. So like there's no
yeah.
incentive for the most part to practice secure coding practices until something bad happens. And that's where most people come in. Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
and two, I think for companies too, one of the biggest problems we're seeing now is they rush to push things out so much. And like you said, so the financial gain is getting it out as fast as possible, not on making it secure and testing it.
Right.
And so we're seeing more and more stuff fail and more people's information getting stolen.
And
Yeah.
so one of the big problems is that for the company, there's very little downside to losing a customer's information. For the customer, it's huge. You know, losing your private information, that's terrible. But for the companies, there's not. So, unfortunately, that's just the way their things are until the laws get stricter, where like a company loses all of their profits for the next 10 years if they have a breach. Like something like that happens, companies will start enacting secure practices. But until that happens, we have to start doing it from kind of the ground up. So learning what we can do as developers to make things more secure.
Well, and I love how like our response in the United States was, let's create insurance for ransomware attacks and stuff. Instead of just like doing better security, let's pay for insurance that they'll pay the people that steal our, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, Chris asked
And
a
Yeah.
really good question, Randy. If you want to,
mhm.
do you have your comments up?
I
Yeah.
don't know.
There's a
Oh,
couple
okay.
of good ones in there, but
Yeah.
say Chris's. Yeah.
He said, on a serious note, do you recommend password managers?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay,
Yeah.
so here's the thing. So right now I'm studying for the OSCP, Offensive Security Certified Professional Exam, which is like one of the hardest cybersecurity exams you can do because you have to hack into six, well, three boxes in one Active Directory with three machines. So it's essentially six boxes you need to hack in 24 hours, and you need to write a report on what you do. And so it's pretty difficult. But essentially, what you do in the beginning is you need to gain an initial foothold into the box. Now, one way you can do that is by finding an unpatched system. So like something where there's a vulnerability that hasn't been updated. Another way is just by using credentials you found somewhere else. So if somebody's using a password somewhere and they use this password across a whole bunch of different places, well, you just try that password somewhere else. And that's what a lot of the bad actors will do is every time there's a data breach, it's not it doesn't matter that your email gets lost. Nobody cares. What they care is that there's an email connected with a password. And so then they say, oh, that email belongs to this person. Well, I'll just try this email with every single cloud storage, every single email provider, every single like social media out there. And a lot of people will have the same password for every single thing or little variations. And here's the crazy thing is that with brute forcing, these little variations are very, very easy to do. So password managers are one of the best things you can do.
No,
I think you made another good point there too, is that if you're not using a password manager, you're more than likely going to be using a shorter password that's easier to remember. And you can brute force even
yeah,
like what, 10, 12 long, you know, character
Yeah.
long passwords in not a lot of time, like
yeah.
few hours.
Well, because everything keeps, I mean, all the hardware keeps getting faster, better now with AI and stuff too, and all it like makes it way easier for bad actors to get that information. And I will say, like, when I started using a password manager, I was blown away because, like, you guys all know, like, there's everything you go to now, you need a login. It's like, it's
Yeah.
frustrating. And so there is that impulse just to use, because, it's like, oh, this is just something stupid. I'll just use the same password. It's like, some stupid whatever that you're logging into, but it's dangerous. And the password manager gets rid of all of that. It makes it so much easier because all you do is click and then just it enters your information for you.
Yeah.
And you can make really
And
good secure passwords for everything. You don't have to remember. You only need to remember one.
that's what I was going to say. The password manager will generate very, very good passwords. Like they're not going to be like your animal's name and the date you were born or graduated college or something.
Or
It's
the
going to be
season and the year.
yeah,
That's like
Yeah.
one of the most typical ones. Like, now it's
summer
what, summer.
2024.
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. If you have a whole bunch of like usernames and you just,
Yeah.
for every username you try summer 2024, it'll work for some of them.
Yeah. So yeah, it's going to generate like a random string of, characters and symbols and things like that. So
Yeah. So another thing that I want to say is that as developers, like not only are we writing the code, which could be secure, every single line of code that you like, the shorter the code, the less bugs there are. The longer the code you write, the more chance for bugs. So
mm,
like number one, we're introducing a whole bunch of potential bugs into the world by writing code. But also, uh, as shown, Verizon has these awesome things. They're called I think DBIR, which is the data breach incident report or something like that. And you can look at them for free. You just need to give them your email so that they can lose your credentials as well. But
They can steal it and lose
basically,
it too.
yeah.
awesome.
But basically, they take a look at all of the reported data breaches each year, and they take a look at how do people get access to them, and a whole bunch of different things. But the number one way that people gain access in almost all hacking attempts, over 70%, is the human element. So social engineering. So I
Mm,
mentioned that we write the code that could introduce bugs, but we're also intimately involved in the whole development life cycle. So if somebody social engineers us, basically gains gains our trust, gains access to our computers and things like that, then all of a sudden they can have access to all of the company's assets, everything that's going on. And so as a developer, it's important to learn about social engineering so
Hmm.
that you can just help defend yourself against that type of thing.
I just want to give a good example that I heard about. I was watching, it was actually on John Oliver. If anybody's, obviously knows the show, you can definitely check out the episode. But they're talking about scammers basically. And during, I guess, like COVID, a lot of money was lost in China for the mafia because they were, gambling was their big thing. So they started doing basically phishing scams and scams. They built what they were doing was they would contact people, act like it was a mistake, then start a relationship through text, email, Facebook, or something like that. And they'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, wrong number, whatever." And then they message them again, start talking, they form a friendship, and then they'd be like, "Oh, I just made a bunch of money on Bitcoin or whatever." And then they had a fake app that they would download to buy this stuff. It would look like they were making money. Just to give you an example, a guy that runs a bank in the Midwest lost $50 million of the bank's money on this scam, and then the bank closed. I mean, like,
nice.
so, but it
Yeah.
just shows you social engineering. Like, people think like, "Oh, it'll never happen to me," but you don't know. Like, we're
Yeah.
people.
Mhm.
We want to
It's
connect with people. We want to feel like, we have
this is a
connections. And I
There you
think,
great
go.
book. If you guys
Yep.
there you
want
go.
Chris
Yeah.
Hadnagy.
yeah,
Yep.
if you guys want to read a book on social engineering, this one is amazing and it'll show you basically how powerful it is.
For
Because
those of you listening, it's called Social Engineering, the Art of
yeah,
Human
social
Hacking by
engineering, the
Christopher
science of
Hadnagy.
human hacking by Christopher Hadnagy.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah,
Yeah.
one password. Bryce was asking, do you recommend any password managers? There's a
Uh,
bunch out there, but
yeah, so there's a bunch, and really all of them are going to be good. I would say stay away from KeePass because that one's outdated and you can hack into that one. But the other ones are pretty good, pretty comparable. So in terms of if you want the safest recommendation, one of this again, I can't give you the safest recommendations because again, I'm still a lifelong student. I don't have all the answers, but a smart thing to do is to have a password manager and then also a backup email address not listed in your password manager. The backup email address is the recovery email address for every single one of your social medias, emails, everything. But that has a completely long, complex password that's different from your password manager password that's not listed in your password manager. So worst case scenario, your password manager gets breached, you can still recover all of your passwords with that email address that you don't use for anything other than a backup email. So that's one way, just to like, the NSA calls it belt and suspenders. So if you lose one, you don't wind up with your pants down.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
All right. Well, I want to get into this list because I think it's sort of going to take us a little bit to go through.
Sure.
It's very bright on my screen because it's a white background. I don't do that. So I move it over here. But yeah, you made like as we go through this, you made me think of a company I used to work for called Zero Bounce, and they're an email validation company. So they like basically clean email marketing lists of dead and old email addresses. And one of my jobs there was to find new business. And I thought it was really interesting because my boss at the time would always be like, "Oh, just call these companies and tell them what we do and they'll buy." And I was like, "Bro, it doesn't work because they don't care. They don't want to spend money on something that does nothing until they have a problem." And the best people like were inbound leads, because what would happen is they would go to send an email and their email service provider, like MailChimp or whatever, would basically block them and say, "Hey, you have too many bad email addresses on your list. You need to clean your email." And those people would buy in a second. They'd be like, just give me, I don't care how much it is. I got to email this right now. And I think that's how it is with cybersecurity. Like people don't value these things until it's too late. And then it's too late.
And then they pay 8,000 times more because they either get in a situation where they have a security breach, or like you just said, right? Like somebody comes to us, I don't care how much it costs, but I need to send this out now. It's
Exactly.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're going to be going over a list of the top 10 cybersecurity practices every developer should follow. This is by Sesame Disk, and
I'll drop it in the comments for anybody.
yeah, we'll drop it in the comments for people who are interested. And some of these go a bit beyond what I would say for most developers need to know, but it's good to kind of do. And I think the last one is probably the most important one, so we'll get to that last.
Private tabs, right?
Right.
Always.
Private tabs,
Always.
and also a privacy screen on your, so
Yeah.
nobody can see it work.
Yes, exactly. We did have some comments in below about,
Oh yeah.
I think
Let's
Chris, go ahead.
should oh I was gonna were they saying about the top things you can do to stay safe online?
Some of them. I know Chris said one that was like use Kali Linux on a USB and then burn your laptop when you're done using it. I think that was a good one.
Yeah.
Like do some
before
have like a Faraday cage.
So before I forget to do this, I just want to let people know what are the top 3 things that non-experts think you should do and the top 3 things that experts think you should do. And this is from a Google paper. I think it was from like 2005, something like that. But things haven't changed because we still are vulnerable to the same exact thing, like SQL injections, which are one of the most devastating ways to lose data, has been going around for 30 plus
Dude,
years.
when
And
the
it's just as
university
bad.
would send out, when we had to do our like internet safety thing, for like you have to do every year with businesses and stuff, when the university would send it out, they were still recommending like eight character passwords. It's
Mhm.
like, dude, this is like so outdated. This is like
I mean,
2023, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Antonio in the comments wrote 2FA, Google or MS Authenticator, SMS, email, password, DNA, iRetinal. Which
Sweet.
Yeah.
can I just
Two-factor is
can I
really
just say
important too.
something
That's how
really quick
important.
that
Yeah.
I had a thought on?
Yeah.
I kind of want your input on this one. So when I was recently in Mexico, there was a business there. It's a very touristy area, so they have all these like weird, sort of businesses that are just trying to get
Mhm.
tourist dollars. So one of them was like turn your eye into art, and it was
Yeah.
an iris scanner that they
Mhm.
had on the side of the building, and then they would like take a picture of your iris and blow it up into like a giant piece of art.
Yep.
And there was just every time I passed it, there was a group of like 30 people around it waiting to scan their iris. And I
Mhm.
was like, man, this is so insecure.
Yeah.
Well, so they use that in China and a lot of other places. It's actually a very, very good way of recognizing someone, and it can be done from a distance of
Mhm.
like 30 meters or more. I think sometimes up to like
Wow.
100 meters they can do it. Yeah,
That's
so they
crazy.
have
Yeah.
like IR blocking glasses. You can look them up. And then
Mm.
they also have like I
Oh, the
forget
shirt
there was
thing.
yeah, there's some
So
shirts that you
then,
can
so
wear
then
that'll
when these
like mess
people
it up.
scan their irises, they're definitely saving that information. And like,
Oh,
you know,
Yeah, I was like,
100%.
man, this is
100%.
like so like not safe, and I guess people have no clue about that, but it's
People
like your
Because
don't
it's
though.
fun. I mean,
identity. It's like
I've
it's like
always
going to a business and being like, turn your fingerprints into art. Like
well,
scan
dude,
your fingerprints.
Turn your
yeah.
social security card, fingerprints, ID, and this into art. Just give us
Yeah.
all of
I've
it. We'll
always
turn it
been
into
very
art.
s- I've always been very skeptical about that 23andMe DNA testing because
It's
it's
Oh
like
yeah.
outrageous.
automatically you
They
just
had a
sign
data
yourself up for
breach
every
too.
criminal database.
Yep.
Yeah,
They had a
bingo. Yeah,
huge data breach. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, let's get into the list.
Yeah, but
Oh,
before,
did you
okay,
hear?
I want
Sorry,
to tell
wait,
the
did
Oh,
you
people the
hear?
top and
Sorry, you just
worst
made
thing
me think
before
of
we get
something.
into.
Hold on. One of those, no, because you said 23andMe. One of those companies that did DNA thing, they got in trouble because they were going to sell the DNA information to China. They were third party.
sick.
Yeah,
Sick.
Awesome,
nice, right? Sorry, go
awesome,
ahead.
awesome.
Yeah, don't trust
Yeah.
anybody. These companies are not trustful. They just care about money.
Yeah.
Okay. So the non-experts think that the top three most important things you can do to stay safe online, one is use an antivirus, two, use strong passwords, and three, visit only known websites.
This is
And while
the
those are good,
non-knowers.
non-experts,
Okay.
amateurs, noobs. And while those are good, they're not the best uh, because antiviruses can only protect you against roughly 40% of viruses out there or 40% of malware. Strong passwords are great, but if you just use the same strong password everywhere, again, susceptible to breach. And then visiting only known websites, yeah, but it really doesn't matter that much as long as you have your some of the other stuff we're going to go over. So the top three things according to experts are update your system. So make sure you have automatic updates on, you patch your system regularly, because that way the only way your system is actually going to get breached is using a 0-day, which is a brand new piece of malware, which at this date costs roughly hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. And most people aren't
Reading
going
the
to spend that
comments,
much money
sorry.
on you. Yeah. Uh, the second is use unique passwords. So a password manager. Bingo. And then the third is use strong passwords. So that they with the experts and the non-experts agreed on using strong passwords, which is good. But yeah, using two-factor authentication also is very high up there.
Okay, cool.
That
I
way,
have
in
I
case
have
in
a
case they do breach your password, they still need the second factor or multiple factors.
I have
Yeah.
a comment of my own plus some in the comments that I thought are funny. So
Mhm.
let me just do Bryce's first. Bryce said, "Does Pornhub count as a known website?"
I think everybody
Well
knows
known,
it, so
actually,
you're
very
good.
well
You're
known.
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
safe. Um, what was my question now? I'll just go to the other ones. Frankie in the comments said antivirus on Linux. So I was wondering if maybe you could explain why an antivirus only
Sure. So
helps with
so
40%.
okay, so antiviruses use what's called signatures, which is basically they take a known virus and they basically take like a fingerprint of a known virus, which is called a signature, and then they store that and they run that against every single file on your computer. And if they find it, then they found malware. But here's the thing: all they need to do is change one bit in the malware, and the signature won't find the malware. So basically for any newer malware, it won't find it, but also for a lot of new malware that will change, it just doesn't work. But it is good to use anyways because it will help catch most of the stuff, just not everything.
It's also why if you have antivirus, if you run the update, you'll see it'll update like as many times as you hit update, it'll find update because they're constantly
Mhm.
updating that list, right?
Yeah.
Because they're constantly changing
Right.
things. So yeah,
And
it's
then
crazy.
Windows versus Mac versus Linux, there's really none that are more secure than others. We hear more about viruses on Windows just because they have the larger market share. Like there's way more
Yeah.
people using Windows, so it just makes sense to go for the low-hanging fruit. You can just attack all Windows computers and you'll get more people. But Linux has its malware, Mac has its malware, so all of it is susceptible. And thinking that one is safe just because it's not Windows or just because it's one of these other ones, it's just not true.
So I remembered my comment that I was going to make, which is, and this is something that I've heard in the past, and maybe you can verify this, is not to click links that you don't know. I think that's like a huge one. And like even in emails and things like that, you can always hover over a link and see like where it's going. But if somebody's sending you a link and you don't know exactly who it is that's sending it to you and what, there's a lot that can be done by just clicking a link, and it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know past companies that I've worked for, they've done tests and like 90% of the staff has clicked unknown links and basically like compromised their computer system with like tests. But do you want to maybe talk on that for a minute and then
Well,
go
so
through
that actually, because we should just skip ahead to number 10 on
Yeah,
this
just
list of
skip
things
to
we were going
10
to talk
because
about. Because
okay.
that's actually, so the 10th thing they have on here is educate and train on security awareness. So this is probably the most important thing because, like I mentioned with the Verizon DBIR reports, 70% of the time it's because of people. There's always the problem exists between the computer and the chair, PEBCAC,
Yeah.
as they say. And so like there's always a human element. People are going to click links. So the more we can educate people, the more you can educate yourself, the better you're going to be. And
I have a
yeah, clicking
question.
links
If
dangerous,
say
even
I
from people you know. Mhm.
yeah, well, say I get an email with a link in it, and I hover over it, and I copy the address, right? Instead of clicking it. Is there somewhere I can go to check it to see if it's like safe
There
before going to
is,
the site?
there is. So there's an awesome site called Virus Total.
Can you put the link in the description so
VIRUSTOTAL.
people can
Yeah, I
click
know,
it?
right?
I'll put it in the
Just
comments.
search.
It's
Yeah,
is it virustotal.com or something?
I'm not sure. Just search.
Oh,
So
okay.
so here's the thing. I don't like to give people links. I just tell them the name of it and I say search it on Google. Because in general, Google's not going to list something highly that's a malicious link. It's possible, but
Unless
it's
it's
not
sponsored.
likely. Yeah,
Unless
unless it's
it's
sponsored, exactly. Unless it's sponsored.
unless
But
they're
it's not
paying.
likely. Right. So just search Google for virus total. I think it is .com, but
It is.
you can input any URL there and it will run it through like 40 different security vendors and tell you if any of them are flagging it as malicious. And so that's something that you can always do with any link just to see. And that actually helps everyone be more secure because if they find stuff that's malicious, they add it to their list of malicious software, and then all of a sudden it starts getting blacklisted all over the place.
I can give actually a personal example too. I remember it was over the pandemic. I don't know if anybody knows this. There was a lot, everybody's home, and there was a lot of scams trying to, because people were out of work and stuff to try and like it was like scams for loans and stuff like that. And I actually had a one of my friends, moms who I know real well, and like she was all on Instagram. I was connected to her as a friend or whatever. I get a message from her on Instagram. It was really weird. And it was like, hey, I just got this. Thank God I just got this like loan to help me get through this. And I was like, what? And I get another one. I'm like, what? So then I just texted her and I was like, what? And she's like, oh, my Instagram account got hacked. She's like, I can't get into it. And I was like, there you go. Like, so they're trying
Mhm.
to give people, but we get convinced because we forget that it's like, we think it's somebody we know, so it must be safe, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah. Pretty
absolutely.
soon
Whenever
with
you get something. Mhm.
with AI video and audio, that's going to be even harder to detect.
Oh,
So
dude,
we got to
it's
be
gonna be
careful
insane.
moving forward. All right.
Yeah. So
Well,
about educating, I know because we're running out of time. So
uh,
about educating, because it's important to learn. So that book that you shared earlier, Russ, that's a great book, Social Engineering by Christopher Hadnagy. That'll teach you how to protect yourself. So that, like I said, 70% of attacks is the human element. So you read that book, you will be a lot better off than most people. If you want to learn more about cybersecurity in general, there's a really good book that I've listened to recently, and it was actually free on Audible if you have like an Audible membership. It's called Hacking the Hacker by Grimes. Actually, really awesome overview of cybersecurity. It goes in depth, but is also very basic as well, and there's a lot to learn. And then the last resource is what I think should probably be like the one book that every coder actually has, is called Writing Secure Code. And this is by Howard and LeBlanc. Can't see it. There we go.
there you go.
So Writing Secure Code by Howard and LeBlanc. This is a Microsoft book, so it has some specifically Microsoft stuff, but it's actually all science-based stuff on how to write the most secure code. It's a huge book. I haven't read the whole thing myself yet, but it is one that I'm going through, and it's a really good book because this is like if you want to be one of the best developers out there, You want to be a secure developer, and this book will teach you how. So I think that's one that everyone should aim to have on their bookshelf.
I would also say too, like not only for protecting yourself, but all you guys, if you want to be developers, and especially if you do freelance and stuff, you're working with clients where you're doing stuff yourself, like knowing the stuff is important too, so that you can also inform your clients and also ensure that they are doing like, what's best so that there's not problems, and to show that you're also ethical and you know what you're talking about, when you're handling, their sensitive data, because you're going to be.
Yeah. I wanted to say before we sort of end, I think we're going to run a little bit over today, but I wanted to add one other thing that I think would be helpful. And then I figured maybe we can go through this list and you give us a 1 minute. I'll say
A
the
one-liner.
number and then you give me the one liner of why this is important. But before we do that, the other thing I wanted to add to this was the Snubsy 30-day security challenge. So I'm going to put the link down there, another link for you guys to not click,
Click this.
but
Dude, it's funny. Every time I would get the security training, they're like, don't click any links. And then the company would send us a link to access the training in our
of
email. It's like,
course,
dude,
yeah.
really? Like, come
I
on.
mean, because how else? But this is known link. So this is a 30-day challenge where you can audit your own security and see how secure am I. Go through this over the next 30 days if you really want to like up your game. This is one of the best ones that that's out there. Um, it's created by one of the like co-founders of Hack5 like YouTube channel, which is they created like the USB rubber ducky thing that you've probably seen around.
And Mr. Robot, yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Robot and all that. But this is a really great security challenge just to like audit everything that you have. And it's a complete walkthrough. It's something that you can do over 30 days to really be sure that you are being secure. And I highly, highly recommend this for anybody who's going to be doing anything on computers because you do have to keep yourself safe. So that's a good one as well. So, all right. So let's go through the list. I'm going to read them off and you tell me why these are important in your opinion. Sound good?
Right. Gotcha.
All right. So number one is huge. Use number one is huge. Use HTTPS.
Yeah, so you want to
HTTP.
make sure all the websites have the S and the little lock on there because that means it uses TLS encryption. And what that means is that people like stuff isn't sent in clear text, essentially. So
Yeah,
people
in
can't
plain
read
text.
what you're doing. And especially this is important for any type of stuff where you would be sending passwords, email addresses, money, anything like that. So there used to be software like HTTPS everywhere, but nowadays a lot of the more mature browsers have that in there anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like that plugin HTTPS everywhere. Yeah. Okay, number two is sanitize user input. So what does that
So
mean?
this is all about SQL injections. So this is the idea of keeping data and code separate. And so SQL injections is one of the easiest, is basically the main way that hackers dump databases and get all your credentials. And they do this because developers have not implemented ways like parameterized queries and other things to separate the data that they're transmitting and the code. So they can the hackers can put a single quote in there and that'll just escape whatever, and then they'll be writing code and all of a sudden they can dump the database. So that's the reason for that.
So basically this would be like for any sort of input form, anything like that. Whatever a user is inputting into that form, you want to make sure that they're not able to write some code in there that would actually execute on the back end of your application. Number three, use secure authentication.
Yeah, so this one is important because some of the less like basic authentication just has stuff sent in clear text. So like even though you think it says authentication, so it must be secure, it's not. So you want to be using one of these more secure authentication things like OAuth. That way you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah. Cool. And like I had this experience, like you don't need to build your own authentication service. Like there's plenty of ones out there that are great and low cost or free that handle that for you because it's very, very complicated.
And frankly, I think for users, just using their Google account's easier anyway because they don't have to make a new account. And then Google handles all the authentication and security. It's a lot easier, right?
Exactly.
At least for your auth. Yeah.
Yeah. Number four, regularly update and patch systems.
Okay, so this was the expert's number one thing to do to stay safe online. And the reason for this is because if you do this, the only way that someone can compromise your machine is by social engineering or using a zero-day attack, which costs roughly $1 million. And unfortunately, most people just aren't that important.
Nope.
Yeah. Like you gotta, I think about this because like years ago I used to be a bicycle mechanic and they're like, people would be like, should I buy the most important lock? And it's like, it's really about just what other bikes are around yours that people are trying to steal. If there's a nicer bike, like lock your bike up next to nicer bikes because more than likely people are going to go for the bigger targets. So if you're not worth a ton of money, you don't have as much to be, concerned about. But if you work for a company that's worth a lot, then you're also a vulnerability. So you got to be careful there. All right. Number 5 is encrypt sensitive data.
Yeah, so this one's huge. This is another big problem with data breaches is there's encryption in transit and also at rest. So like when something's on a hard drive and then also when it's moving between different devices. And so
Mm,
you want to have it encrypted both in transit and at rest. But oftentimes stuff will get dumped. Like I remember there was some cryptocurrency a while back that all of their all what was it? All the passwords or something were stored in clear text. It was some
Yep.
Solana wallet. They had all the passwords stored in
yeah.
clear text on the server, and it's like somebody got access to the server. It was not encrypted in storage, and so all of a sudden they just had access to all the funds.
This is
Yeah.
also important why, like when you're developing stuff, if you're using packages, read documentation carefully because it'll tell you like, like what it's doing, how it does it. Like I know, for instance, like Django doesn't store passwords it doesn't. It encrypts them and never stores the actual password as a password on the system. So stuff like that's important to know, and you need to read the documentation to know that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Reading documentation's always very
Very
important.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 6, implement proper access controls.
Yeah, so this is the principle of least privilege. Like, don't let people do stuff they shouldn't have access to do. Not everybody needs to be an admin. Like, people
Mm,
really only need access to be able to do what they're able to do. And also, role-based access control. So some of you, as you get jobs in companies, you might notice that they may shift you around departments. They may enforce mandatory vacations. And so a lot of this stuff is to help prevent any type of fraud that could be going on with somebody staying in the same position or with having too much privileges or different things like that. So all of that is just managing the controls, what you have access to make sure that if you do cause harm, it's the least amount possible.
nice. Number 7, use security headers.
Yeah, so this one is just helps prevent cross-site scripting attacks, which is basically uh, something that I think for most developers, you don't need to think too much about this early on. It's kind of like a later type of thing.
Yeah, I would agree there. Monitor and log activities.
So this is an interesting one because like the Verizon DBIR reports, they they showed that like most uh most threat actors were in the systems for many months to years before they were actually caught. So like yes, it's important to monitor and log activities, but it's important to find some type of logging thing that gives you actual signal over noise, whereas most of them just give you noise. So
Yeah.
this one is kind of like, man, that's why it's,
I would agree
not
with
that
that. I
important.
mean, I've seen a lot. Like, if you use Google Analytics and stuff, like the information you get from that sometimes can be almost worthless because it's just like overview information. But there are other things out there that you can use.
Mhm.
Okay, number 9, conduct security testing.
Important, but nobody has time for it. So essentially, in the development lifecycle, there's development, there's testing, and then there's deployment,
Yeah,
essentially. And so what'll happen is before development starts, whoever will give this time frame of say, we'll have it done by then. And then, a week before then, it's still in development. Hasn't been
yeah,
tested at all. So testing gets skipped because they need to deploy it and then causes a lot of problems.
And we see
yeah,
this more and more now where software comes out and it's not finished or it has bugs
totally.
and it has I mean, look at video games, dude. Ever since they could start updating them, look at how many games come out that aren't even done that have super huge
Not
bugs.
even
And that
close.
just
Yeah,
yeah, and that's just one industry. That's
Mhm.
everything
yeah,
now because they're all in a rush to push things out as fast as possible.
Yeah, so
yeah,
there's a few different types of security testing. There's static testing, there's dynamic testing. And so static testing is looking at the code. Dynamic testing is actually running it and seeing what happens. And oftentimes, most of the security vulnerabilities are found by fuzzing. So basically, not even like a human doing it, just like some computer spitting various input at it and
Mhm.
essentially finding out where it gets errors. So that's, in terms of testing, that's one way to do it. And then also
Interesting.
penetration testing. Didn't
Oh,
mention that on here.
that's another thing too for developers. I would suggest too is error handling. Understanding
Yeah.
how to handle errors so that you're not spitting back a ton of information to people that could be used to hack the system or and stuff like that. You got to be careful with that too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then the last one is educate and train on security awareness, which we already sort of discussed. Um,
Again, but it's good to mention it twice because this is the
yeah.
most important one. So like I think by watching this 40 minutes, you've learned a lot. You probably know a good amount more than many developers, but it's kind of a constant, never-ending thing. The more you can learn, the better off you'll be, the more of an asset you'll be for your company, the less chance that you'll cause them or the customers severe damages.
I just want to make one last point too. Like, yeah, it is it's a lot. It is a lot. Everything in text, a lot of information, right? But like, I think if you start by looking at yourself and how do I keep myself secure, that will then inform you as you're developing too and help you see like areas and help you think about it in terms of security rather than just pushing something out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. All
Mhm.
right. Well, I wanted to finish off with this one comment, which is if you've watched this whole episode, your mind is probably blown at this point, and I can almost guarantee that in any other coding tutorial you've ever done in your entire life, you've never heard one single thing that we just discussed. And this really made me think about a few weeks ago on Insider Web Dev Incubator when we were discussing how to build data structures and how to, assign user IDs. And Chris, one of the students who's in here right now, asked about, why don't we just use like user one, user two, user three, user four, user five? And as a new developer, you might think that is a good practice, but the truth is it's not. And it's because you can actually guess, users inside of a web app. And so we use random strings of numbers, letters, things like that. So it's something that you're just not going to get inside of regular tutorials. Like we have a good diversity of skill sets in here. We have, cybersecurity expert, although he doesn't like being called an expert on staff. Um,
I was actually just
so
actually just last night I was doing a King of the Hill capture the flag competition, and
yeah.
some dude was trolling me, calling me a child. So not yet an expert.
All right. We have a cybersecurity child on staff.
There we go, right here.
And yeah. And so my point of all this is if you are looking for a way to learn more about web development, become a actual web developer who can get paid and get hired, we do have a program that we offer. It's called the Web Dev Incubator. It's a full curriculum. We also have 4 hours of one-on-one more mentoring every single week. We do a Wednesday session that's a code along. We do a Saturday session, which is today, right after this call, which is accountability and coaching and code review. It's probably the best value that you could possibly find anywhere online. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about it, there's way more to it, but I'm not going to waste any more time because we are running way over today. But
Mhm.
if you guys are interested, just put the word cybersecurity down in the comments and we will reach out to you. We'll set up a action call. We had some last week. And basically, the action call, we just discuss with you what the program is. Antonio says Web Dev Incubator. So I presume that means he's interested. Um, but we'll set up a call with you, discuss, what it's all about, if you'd be a good fit for the program. I promise you, it's the cheapest possible thing in the world compared to the value. And it is not going to stay that way for a long time at all because we are coming up to the wrap up of the beta program. And so if you want in, now is the absolute like end of the road sort of time to join at this price. Otherwise, it's going to be incredibly more expensive. Like I'm saying literally like 2 to 3, probably 5 times more expensive because the amount of value that's being provided in this program is top notch. You also get private Telegram group, which gives you access to us 24/7, right? So you can ask us anything. So it's huge. If you want a mentor in web development, I see Frankie in there writing cybersecurity. So just
We'll reach out to you soon. Yeah.
yeah, we'll reach out to you probably later today or tomorrow because we do have this call. But yeah, anything else for you guys? You guys
Yeah.
have
I
anything
would
else?
just say, yeah, you said it great. Like we help you guys with projects. You will literally become a web developer within weeks of starting with us. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we try to push our students like a lot further
It
than
should,
they want to go, but it's
it
also
should also be
self-paced,
noted.
so
It should also be noted this is not a boot camp.
it's
So
not a
there's
boot.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of confusion sometimes where people think, oh, this is a boot camp. Absolutely not a boot camp. This is at your own pace.
Yeah,
So
it's
within
a
a
coaching
year,
and mentoring program. Like we are here to mentor you, which you're not going to get in a boot camp. That's just like a curriculum. Go ahead.
Yeah.
yeah. So within a year, we guarantee you, if you hold up your end of the bargain, you will be a hired web developer. But it's something that's at your own pace. Some people learn quickly, some people learn slowly, some people have more time, some people have less time. But what we do is we get you started creating your own projects, building websites, so that eventually at the end of the year, you're totally confident to be able to do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. All right. So Frankie, Antonio, we see you in there. Anyone else who's watching and is interested, even if you see this after, just write cybersecurity in there. It's a mentoring program. Yeah, Bryce is inside there. He was under the impression it was a boot camp, which easy to understand because there's so many out there. But
Yeah.
it's not. It's a mentoring program. We're here to support you on your journey. It's more than just like teaching you syntax. Like we're human beings. We want you to become a quality human being and a quality developer. And so we really try to support our students. So if you're interested, cybersecurity in the comments. Otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in. It's
All
been
right.
a great long episode. I hope you learned a lot on cybersecurity. That was an awesome one. Thank you, Randall, for all your expertise. And if you're inside the Web Dev Incubator, we'll see you in about 13, 15 or so minutes. The link will be in the private Telegram.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Peace out. Have a great Saturday. We will see you next Saturday, bright and early, 9 a.m.
Peace.